Oh, George is in twice now. So. Oh, yeah. I think you're in twice, George. In two, looks like in two different things. Anyway.
I'm bilocational.
Yeah, you are. I can see. See ya.
Hold on.
Anyway, okay. So. That's
what you get for having amateurs.
Yeah. I can probably get rid of one of them if you want. Hopefully it won't get rid of both of you. Anyway. So, does anyone want to start with something? Share, testify, or ask anything? There you go. I got rid of it, George, so it's alright. Okay. Alright. So, where do you want to start?
Well, it looks like everybody's being shy this morning. Yeah, I've got a question for you. I think if I can put it together into words, we've been doing a bench of three, and we're it's the three who originally started with you, David, Josh, and I, and we finally just said we're going to get started, and we've been doing basically what one of us has on our heart that day, something that's we've heard about, or even sometimes something we're personally going through. And is that really what we should be doing? I mean, we've kind of felt like we just needed to start instead of coming. Well, we're gonna do something for the whole city or the whole church, but just start small. Or is that just like thinking too small? So anyway, I just thought I would ask you that.
Okay. Well, a bench of three will form around a blueprint, and that has a mandate attached to it to do things. So, in this sense, is this a bench of three for your ecclesia? If it's a bench of three for ecclesia, then it will be have the mandate to be able to administrate the ecclesia's blueprint. Now, that's not to say that you can't relationally connect together, do things together, get to know each other in that way by engaging heaven together practically. But a bench is a governmental, obviously, position authorized by God to be outworking a particular blueprint. So for me, it would be, okay, what is that blueprint? Because that really sets your agenda, because that enables you then to see, okay, we do this or we don't do that because it's really part of our blueprint or not. And if that blueprint has, let's say it's a ecclesia blueprint, it has 7 mountains attached to it, has a bench of 7 attached to it. You may not have any of those things, but then you can call those things into place because you have the governmental authority for that blueprint to see it establish. You become the foundations on which it's built, and that then releases others to begin to fill that blueprint out as they find their destiny intersects with it. So a lot of it is really to do with administrating the blueprint. That's really what a bench does. And I mean, you could be given a personal mandate anytime to do something which could be completely separate from that blueprint. But when you come together as a bench, it's really to do with focusing on how do we and what are we supposed to do in alignment with that blueprint today. When we first began to do that here, or with our sort of second attempt at it, we did spend a number of months working through the relational things, making sure that we got to a point where we understood where we were coming from, or each other's different redemptive gifts. So we've set a foundation of relationship that then, has been very foundational in then us continuing in everything we do. And sometimes when we come together, just because we've come together and we've engaged, things have happened just because we've been talking about it. Because in a sense, we're carrying heaven's government, and some people think, well, I must go into heaven to do that. Well, yeah, there is an aspect of things that we do in heaven, like court cases or other things, but there are things where we've found just actually being together forms a creativity that actually inspires heaven and the insight of heaven and solutions from heaven just to manifest themselves. And we found, when we've done that with our regional bench, we actually found things just changed. And when we came back together, we started testifying to, remember the last time we were together and we were talking about this, it happened. And it just happened. Things just happened because of the connection that we made. So, there's lots of different ways of doing things, and I think you have to find how that works for you. Generally when we come together as a bench, sometimes we reflect, we debrief, we ask each other what's going on in our own lives. Has God been showing you anything? We look at, okay, for us we have a bench of 7 report or a minutes of their meeting, so we talk about that. Is there anything there that we need to do? What are the plans that God has, strategies for what we're doing? We share, we talk, we step into heaven sometimes together to engage our mountain, because essentially that's what you're where you are together on your blueprint mountain. And we have an angel or angels attached to that mountain. Sometimes they bring our scroll, our book. We look at the pages sometimes. There's so many different things we do, but it's all relational. I mean, that's the basic foundation of it, is relational. And there's no set pattern. Sometimes we'll just chat and talk and share, and sometimes we'll, and generally one of us is a scribe, which isn't me, fortunately, and she writes things down in her book, and it's like, okay, yeah, we need to do this. We need to engage that next time we meet. So some things come up and we put them on the agenda for next time. Sometimes we actually have no agenda, and sometimes we step into heaven and say, God, is there anything you want to do? But generally we are administrating something, so most of the time we will have that blueprint that we have to look at and actually address. We have our bench of 12 meetings, so we relate to them. So what are our 7 mountains doing? So generally we're sort of looking to see, how is that blueprint working? Is it out working? Is there anything we need to do? In fact, we're having an away day on Saturday with our bench of 12 and our bench of 7 to do some specific things that God showed us when we stepped into heaven. And we outworked an agenda for that by asking God to give us revelation, and we have a specific thing that we're going to do together on that day, which will be some heavenly encounters, some looking at certain specific things that we're working through right now. That's how things work with us. We get, as a 3, we get the directives. We usually share it with our 12, and then we have a meeting tonight where all our mountains are coming together, and all the benches of those mountains are coming together, so that we can talk about a particular strategy that God's given us. So that's all really part of administrating the governmental aspects of being a bench. But it will very much be determined by what sort of blueprint you have. You know, if you were part of a regional bench, you wouldn't have an on-the-ground ecclesia. You would be actually looking at administrating on a wider base, calling maybe cities of refuge into place, or doing court cases for the region, as God gives you the direction when you come together. It will be very different in that. So, I mean, does that give you some sort of thing? So where would you be coming with, you know, in terms of why are you coming together? How would you see it?
Again, I think it would be based on starting something, not necessarily going after the full blueprint. So it sounds like might have got the cart before the horse a little bit, but we kept kind of waiting for the blueprint, and so we felt, you know, we really needed to just kind of start moving. Maybe as a bench of three, we can, I guess, start maybe trying to, or as three getting together, trying to have the blueprint come to where we can really see it and know it. I mean, like you said before, there's things that we do, there's things in our hearts that are already there that are really kind of part of the blueprint. Maybe we could start establishing it, and or asking it to be revealed in a greater way to the body, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, I think my encouragement would be is to really seek for that blueprint. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, but we don't see it." But you probably already carry it in your hearts. It's probably already things that you may already be doing. It's just coordinating those things and putting them into a perspective. So, okay, if you're looking at ecclesia, okay, you will have 7 spheres of governmental influence. What are they? You probably know what most of them are already, because there'll be things which are within the DNA of your ecclesia. There may be some things that come with a different perspective, but they're probably already there. And I think probably if you just started to, okay, let's actually engage with this, and then let's just write down the things that come into our thoughts as God inspires them, and then compare notes and see where the overlaps are, and you'll probably find there are lots of overlaps. And that's really how these sorts of things tend to work. You know, if you do get an architect's drawing, great. But actually, when I was given, you know, we were operating as a bench, and you know, in terms of the ecclesia, in several benches before we ever had a blueprint. Actually, as a written sort of diagram, but we had the vision, if you like, that God had given us. We just hadn't expressed it in that way. Yeah, we had 7 mountains, but we didn't see how they fitted together with our sort of on-the-ground ministries or other things we do, until the picture sort of brought it all together. And that sort of brought, hey, here's our vision statements, here's our 7 mountain spheres, and this is how they sort of function together in an overall picture. But we were operating for a good 12 months before we actually had the picture, but we still had the heart of it that we were carrying. We just didn't necessarily see all the bits, how they work together. So the picture, the blueprint, just helped to clarify a lot of what we were already doing, you know. But it does help to have an idea of what it is that God has given you as a vision to do and accomplish, that then you can then focus on how do we see people that God has given who are part of who we are outworking that. So we release people, we call people, we send out angels to engage people. There's all sorts of things you can do once you know what it is that you're looking to call people to. So, you know, initially we had 5 mountains that were I knew the names of because I'd seen them, but we didn't have the other 2. And it was probably a year or so, having first shared the initial mountains, probably more than that the other two mountains sort of got revealed, because I basically kept asking God, what are they, and eventually they just came in, and then we sort of added them to our 7 mountains, and then after that we then pulled together the picture of it. And I would encourage, I would much better if 3 people were looking to pull that together than 1. I was mostly doing it on my own when I first started, because we didn't have people who were actually engaging at that level. So once we did, then the blueprint just became something that we all agreed to. I mean, everything was actually, do we acknowledge that this is what God is? Yes, we do. We feel this is it. We all carry this in our hearts. This is something which is an expression of the DNA of who we are, foundationally, which is why it was no surprise when we shared, well, yeah, this DNA comes from Isaiah 61. So our mountain names really are a reflection of Isaiah 61. Good news, freedom, harmony, health. I mean, they're from that. And I would imagine you've already got that within your hearts. It's just you almost sort of don't think you have, because you haven't got a picture. But I think you could find the picture just by putting it down, and everyone's sort of picture of it will look different. I've got lots of examples of where people have put together their sort of blueprint, and they look totally different, but they carry the same basic, heavenly perspective. They just look different because people are different in how they represent some things. I'm very much sort of I'll produce a flow diagram or something that I can follow. Other people put down ideas, that is, Venn diagrams or overlapping. So I mean, lots of different ways of doing it. I would sort of spend some time focusing on that, so that you've all got a clarity of, now this is what we really feel God has called us to build and to establish. Then you can really then focus on how you're going to do it. And then you sort of start to look at what are all the things we do, how much of that is contributing to the establishment of this blueprint that God's given, and how much of them are just historic things like meetings, certain things. Like we actually started to jettison some things that were actually not really part of the blueprint. They were things historically that we did, like prayer meetings. It's like, well, we used to have prayer meetings because every church has a prayer meeting. Well, it wasn't part of our blueprint to have a prayer meeting as we used to have. So we stopped having them, because we found that God was giving us a new way of doing things, so we had to let go of some of the old ways of doing them. And so some of it actually meant, and now everything we do, we say, is this actually a reflection of our blueprint, or is this some, religious mindset that we're defaulting to? So we have something which actually we can use as a sort of a bit of a plumb line to actually evaluate things that come. So someone else then comes and says, I have a vision for doing this. And we obviously encourage that, because we want people to hear God about doing things. But we then say, okay, is that in line with the blueprint that we've been given, or actually does God want us to expand and develop that blueprint to include this, or is this already part of one of our 7 mountains? And generally we'll find that it is already part of one of our 7 mountains. Like, for instance, someone a couple weeks ago contacted us and said, I've got a blueprint, I've got a mandate to do something with marriages and preparation for marriages and blah blah blah. So, and it was like, I'd like to do it, and it will become something that we can engage the community with, because it's not just going to be about Christians, it'll be, so okay, well, is that in line with our blueprint? Where would that fit within our mountain? Well, okay, is that good news to someone? Yeah, potentially. Is that a blessing to someone? Yeah. Okay, well, we have something that we're pulling together called the Exchange, where we're looking to help do lots of things that will be ways of engaging people and seeing people come into our sort of equipping track and be part of who we are. And so we have used it just to help us evaluate a lot of things, so that we keep on track and don't lose focus and don't get dragged off in tangential things. And then we have one of our mountains is Enterprise, and they are really good at consulting and evaluating on projects and visions that people have and helping them ground them and earth them out, because that's their mountain authority, is to do that. So whenever we get someone who brings something like that, we usually say, okay, it'd be really great if the Enterprise mountain could come and have a chat with you to actually see and give you some insight into what will it take to actually get this off the ground. What are the things you need to think about? Because that's what they're gifted to do, and they have authority to do that. So we just, in a sense, put them into the system that's already in place, where people are already doing some of these things, and then they benefit from that. And those people who don't really think strategically or logically but have a heart for something, it really helps to have people who do think in a way that can get something on the ground and help them think about, well, what things do we need to put in place to make this happen, from both spiritual and sort of physical things, because you have to do things correctly, righteously, according to the law and charity law and everything else. For us, because we're a charity and a company and stuff, various things like that. So we have people who operate that. I mean, for me, that's not where I'm at all. I'd much rather do other things. But actually, some people, without that, we wouldn't have a lot of the things we're doing right now functioning as well as they are, because they see things I wouldn't even dream of thinking about, but they just see things, which is great. When you all start functioning as a body and everyone's doing the bits that they're supposed to do, everything works better, and that's I think sort of the process. So I would encourage you to start there, really release what's already placed within your hearts. And I think you'll find you have a lot more than you really think. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. That's really good. That's helpful.
Okay. No problem. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I thought you were going to go, George.
Well, you're already there now, Kristen, so.
I am. So, my goodness, there's lots going on. How did you, this is just a little rabbit trail question. How long did it take for your bench of 7 to all, kind of get there? What was your time frame? Give me some.
Yeah.
We got 3, almost 4, and they're actually, starting to function. I love what you said last week, that the Godhead sits in the places of the seats that haven't been taken yet. That was very encouraging when I heard
that. Well, to be honest, it's like our first 7, it was like disaster in one sense. They were all really, really pastoral, functioning, mercy gift people, and they just kept going round and round in circles for a while. But we learned a lot, and then when we began to find people who found their places, and we then got our correct bench working, because one of the 7 became part of the bench of 3, and one who was on the bench of 3 became part of the 7. That actually started to shape some things. Then we had some personnel changes, where one of the 7 was also on one of the mountains, and they said they wanted to focus that. So that then enabled some more people to come into it. So overall, it's probably taken to the point where I would say it seems to be functioning really well, and they're doing things from a heavenly perspective most of the time. So they step in, get an agenda, each item of the agenda from God, they then step in and find out what they're supposed to do with it, rather than just sitting down talking and trying to come up with a solution to things. Now, I think that's really working. But, you know, occasionally you have to just encourage them to think about some stuff. You know, and I can't remember whether I was talking to you or someone else, where, you know, it was like our group, they were sort of, they shared when we came with our 12 meeting that they actually felt we weren't going to meet on the 27th of December, you know, and it was like, okay, now it didn't sit right with me, so I asked them how did they come to that conclusion, you know, and they said, well, we stepped in and asked God, and I said, well, what did you ask him? You know, and really what they really were asking was, is it okay if we don't meet? You know, to which God, well, it's okay, you know, but when we actually suggested, well, okay, let's go and ask him a direct question, do you want us to meet? We actually found, yes, he did, and he was going to show us why he wanted us to meet. You know, so for that, it was, again, just helping, you know, learning the way. It was not like a big heavy thing, oh, you terrible people, you've made this terrible mistake. It was just like, okay, let's evaluate how we did this and how it worked. You know, so overall it's probably taken, you know, 3 years to get to the point where we have a full 7. Yeah, at one stage we had a 4, then we had a 5, then we had a 6, then we had a 7, then it went back to a 6, and then it went back to a 7. You know, so personnel have changed. It's a pattern of government, not the people. So I would expect over the next 5 years the majority of that 7 to change, because I would see other people maturing and having a heart for that, and God wanting to come into that place. I would see the fact that 1, 2, 3 or 4 of the 7 are actually on other mountains, which is not an ideal thing. So I would hope that we would have everyone on their mountains separately, as opposed to being part of the 7. But it's not, doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, but it helps to focus sometimes. So yeah, it's taken quite a long time. We're still working together. We still, you know, because the angel of the house has a place on the 12, we get feedback, and we can talk and share and, you know, see how it works. You know, but it takes time. You know, the biggest thing is not doing things from an old perspective, defaulting to old mindsets, old mechanisms. You know, trying to solve everyone's problems, putting fires out and chasing your tails continually with pastoral issues and things like that. You know, we want that. It's a governmental place, so they can administrate that. Now, they've done a lot of court cases. So they've identified things that weren't right. They've identified things where things didn't seem to be in the right place, and then done a court case, and then they present us with all this stuff. Okay, well, we did this, and so, oh, great, that's really good. So then we may ask some questions about, okay, where did this? Because they used to do lie busting and lie bust things, and so it was like, okay, did you lie bust this, or was this a court case? You know, did you get this from God, or did you get this from the accusations of the enemy? And then we help them to see there's a difference between those two things and how they work. Because, you know, you can lie bust something and get revelation of the truth of why something is operating, but not actually deal with it. And the court case actually generally deals with it and deals with why it's there and removes why it's there, and then gives you the authority to go on from there, carrying that authority to change things. You know, so it took time to understand that, learn how to do it, and you know, I think they're doing great now. You know, there's still things that we're working through, and you know, I suppose there's always going to be stuff because we're all growing and maturing, but it's taken time, and I wouldn't shortcut the time. You know, you have to have a realistic expectation. I probably started off with a very optimistic expectation for the first while, and very quickly realized that well, why, this seems really simple, why can't you do it? You know, that was my frustrated head at the time. And sometimes, you know, I found that we weren't given enough guidance. We weren't actually giving enough support, you know, because we didn't want to impose, you know, and that was important. And then sometimes when you come in and try and correct something, it's seen as being too much guidance, you know, or being heavy-handed, another expression for it, you know. But we've learned, you know, to try and balance giving some encouragement and some direction with giving some feedback and some support once things are going. You know, everything's working much better now. You know, and they know more of their roles and responsibilities. It took a long time for them to understand that they were responsible, you know, and therefore accountable. So when we kept asking them questions, well, you know, how's this going? How's that going? How's the other going? They were like, oh, you're telling us off. You know, and it's like, no, why do you get that we're telling you off? We're just asking you to give us some feedback about how things are going. You know, so there was this mindset of, okay, if we don't get it right, we're going to be told off. Therefore, well, actually, if we don't do anything, we can't be told off. No, I'm not saying it was conscious, but actually that was what was going on, because there was a fear of responsibility. And we had to, again, do a court case to deal with that fear of responsibility so people could actually embrace what God was calling them to do without fear. You know, and therefore, when we ask questions about how things were going, not to actually think that we were getting at them. Because we weren't. We were just wanting genuinely to actually find out, well, how are things doing? How is this going? And how is it at work? But, you know, it's an absolutely key place for an on-the-ground in Ecclesia, because if you haven't got that going on, and they carry the heart of what the blueprint is and the heart of the sort of the vision of what it is, then it can be very difficult. But when they really do start to carry that, then they start to actually come up with creative things, and you know, and they're then saying, "Hey, it'd be great if we can do this, and we'll do that." And to start with, they kept asking permission, and we were saying, "Well, you don't need permission. You've already got permission. We've already authorized you and invested you with authority in this. You know." You don't have permission to come and change the blueprint, but you do have permission to come and outwork the blueprint. Therefore, find a way that God wants you to do it, because we aren't going to tell you how to do it, because that would be us interpreting how you do it. You need to find out. And the same for all the mountains. You know, we weren't going to say, okay, what is this mountain? All we're saying is, this is the 7 words that we have. Now go and define what those things are, and find your own blueprint for each mountain. Well, it took ages for them to be confident enough to really do that. So we kept asking, you know, give us your blueprint, send it to us, write it out. And then of course that challenges, oh, we really need to know what it is if we're going to write it out and put it on paper. And some of them were like really slow at putting it on paper, because they had the same issues. Well, if it isn't on paper, then it can't be seen, and you know, and those are sort of the mindsets that were in place in people. But now, you know, each of them have done that. They're now working with some of their sub-mountains and different things to try and outwork it. So it, you know, it's grown, it's developed, and there's a long way to go. You know, it's you know, it takes time to change an old way of doing anything. You know, and along the way, you know, there are some bumps in the road, and you know, some rough patches, and some times where you have to shift some obstacles, and you know, but it is really worth the effort to establish it right and correctly. You know, yeah.
Thank you. I got that was just one rabbit, Tara.
Yeah, go on.
I get it. I'll put it out as a thought. I don't know if it's actually a question. When a few weeks ago and then over the month when I was asking you some questions about some of the courts and all that kind of stuff, and your encouragement was always, to get the heart of God, go into, the was, get the heart of God, what's the original heart of God, to bring it back, to ask myself, questions so I could hear. And so I asked him, I said, okay, I know I've been in the was, but I can't say that I have an actual pathway that I would actually walk on with confidence that I was going to get there. And so I asked, and wisdom shows up. She said, I can help you with that. And so we went, and so I've been sitting in this place for some time, and it looks, I suppose it reflects the spiritual realm around me, and it looks like I'm sitting in this huge mall, and there you see the structure of our portal and the elevator and the angels and all that stuff, and all of a sudden what came through is it looked like an oceanic jet stream.
Right, yeah.
That's what, and I went, oh, and so I've just been sitting in that for a while, and I'm not quite sure, I haven't just gone with it, but it's just, maybe it's because it seems a little different, because, we've heard for so long, go up and down, not to and fro.
Yeah.
So I've just been sitting it, but it's the most interesting thing. So maybe just unpack the was, and do you actually have a pathway that you recognize? Obviously, after you use the pathway for a while, you don't really need it, but the pathway is pretty cool.
Yeah. What I've found in engaging, whatever you want to call it, if you're calling it engaging God's heart in eternity, or engaging what was, you're going to a place that's not influenced by sin, and therefore it's not a place to cognitively try and figure anything out. Because as soon as you try and cognitively try and figure something out there, you're applying this realm's perspective to eternity, and that's impossible. So you can't apply any of our present dimensional understandings to eternity. It doesn't work. So you have to spiritually engage and come home, if you like, to where you were birthed from. And I've found that is exactly what you're saying. I just sit there or stand there. I just go there. I don't even try, unless God speaks to me there, I don't even try and ask anything, or in one sense, it's almost like I just go, I'm there, and my spirit absorbs something of that eternal truth, value, heart, revelation, direction, whatever it might be. And sometimes I'll go with a perspective of, well, I'm just going, bringing my mountains, but when I get there, all that just goes, and I just am there. And I find that when I'm there, I come out of it and come back into what is. It's like I'm different. I'm carrying something different. Things feel different, seem different, without having done anything. But of course, then that directs everything I do. So for me, I've been there in several ways. So I've been in different places and I've ended up there. But I follow the pathway for myself. I go there by engaging the ark and stepping into Him. Being in Him, then I have access to eternity because I'm in Him and He's omnipresent in every dimension. So that's the pathway I would take every day. I would step in Him and be in Him where He is in eternity, rather than being in what He's doing in this created order. Because obviously He's here represented by the four faces of God in this created order, so I'm stepping there. I've also engaged there by engaging wisdom on her heights and engaging the way, or the ancient path. So that has taken me into eternity. I've also engaged there being on the Firestones. Once I was on this and and I'm just like, whoa, where am I now? You know, it's like, how did I get from here to where I am now? Because it's like, you know, and I just felt completely in a different place. The key for me is the desire to engage God, spirit to spirit, without the pollution of sin in the way. Because no matter, you know, how conformed I am to Christ's image, I'm not conformed as I will be. So there's still areas where if I try and put my cognitive reasoning in place, I may misinterpret something or filter it. So I try not to filter things with my mind, but just allow my spirit to receive. And then I go with what my spirit instinctively then directs me to do. You know, and I find that that's very different from when I'm talking to God, when I'm in my own garden with Him, where I might be on the dance floor with Him or whatever. It's very different. It feels different. It's like I'm not connecting with the individual personality of God. It's almost like it feels very different when I'm back into that eternal place, because the last time I went on the Firestones, everything that I'd first experienced in terms of the fruit of the Spirit and engaging with love, joy, and peace, I experienced that emotionally in this realm, and I connected to, okay, it was like feeling love, feeling joy, feeling peace. You know, it was all very emotionally connected to my past experience, and it was just like, whoa, this is nothing like my past experience, but it's still an experience that I could relate to. When I engaged the last time, and this is like the fourth level of really engagement on the Firestones that I've gone into, I was feeling that I was engaging the same things, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, but from an eternal perspective. What is love like in eternity, rather than how I see love expressed in time and space? And it was just so unbelievably difficult to describe what I experienced, because I had no grid of reference for it. But it was just like, whoa, it just completely expanded my spiritual consciousness of God and what God was like, or what He is like in eternity. I mean, it's very even difficult to describe it, but it was way, way beyond anything I had experienced before. And it was just like, wow, this is love. You know, it's nothing like actually what I relate to it here like, really. This is joy. This is peace. And it was like God together in unison expressing love. It's how God was love before He had anyone to be loved to. You know, it's how joy and peace were before anyone was there to even understand it. And it was just like, this is way, way different than actually anything else. And I'm still not really able to fathom it out, but it was just like, it was like my conscious awareness of something was at, say, level 1, and this went up to a level of 1,000 without all the gaps in the middle to get me there. And it was just like, whoa, what is this? You know, but it sort of, it was amazing, and it was really beneficial, because when I go into that place on a daily basis, I have a context in which I'm in, which is all that. Even though it's like, can't describe it, it's like I have a context that my spirit actually thrives in. That's the sort of as much as I can sort of express it, but it's certainly a pathway that for me, you know, is absolutely critical to everything. You know, now it's part of our journey, and I'm not saying that you can just step into the heart of God just by thinking about it, in a sense, when you've not gone through a lot of other engagements with God. But it's his heart. So it's, you know, it's where we were all formed. It's where all his thoughts about us are, and we can engage them. And that's really what I'm engaging with, the vast sum of his thoughts about me, about my destiny, about everything that's related to him and me, in a way which is just a spiritual experience. That's all I can say, really. It's a spiritual thing, but it's hugely beneficial to directing what I do on a daily basis. You know, because now love for me is not about what I thought it was. Joy is not what I thought about. Peace is not what I thought. There's so much more to the dimensions of it than I ever imagined or thought. And that sort of puts some things in perspective when I sort of engage them, because it's just like, oh wow, you know, and it helps me see things from a different perspective. You know, seeing things from an eternal perspective has changed how I view the world and everything, really. You know, but it only sort of manifests when I come across something that highlights the fact that I'm seeing it different, if you see what I mean. It's not like I could tell you how I'm seeing it different, but then I come across this situation and it's just like, I see it differently and I respond to it completely differently, because I'm coming from that perspective, whereas before I only had this dimensional perspective to come to from, and therefore I would have come from, hey, the Bible says this, or, you know, well, I've got this mandate to do that. But actually this just sort of opens it up to a different level of experience, really. But yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Helps explain sounds like I'm sitting there trying to disengage what I'm supposed to disengage before I can. Yep. It is. It just, I go, this just feels like I'm in an oceanic jet stream, and I can see the light, you know, move, and the movement of it. And,
yeah.
And but I know in my spirit it feels different than like the dance floor, because it feels like it's going somewhere. It's not, a dance floor is more like it's wrapping around you, moving with you, whereas it feels more, you know, purposeful. So, but it is very, very interesting.
Yeah, and in a sense, eternity is all now. So it's just like, it's just so different, you know, and so it is. You can, how you is different. And so it is like, you know, we talk about stepping in or engaging in or ascending in, but once you're stepped into that dimension, of course that dimension opens up a whole load of other dimensions which are trans-dimensional, rather than sort of, well, I'm going up more and more and more. And we tend to think about going up and up, but actually you're going more in and through, and in a way, when you're in that realm, it opens up the other realms for you to engage. So yeah, the to and froing, yeah, there is. There are things to do, places to go, things to engage in those realms, which are not the same. There are different dimensions of places to engage. They're not the same. They are different. And so yeah, and I'm, you know, exactly where everyone is on that journey. And you know, sometimes it's like I find it very difficult to be able to describe things to people, because it's difficult to describe something you haven't got a real grid for. And so you're coming up with terms like, well, a jet stream, or for me it's like being in, you know, I find it's like being in a creative mind. It's just like with all these light and stuff all going off all over the place, and I'm in the middle of it. You know, that's it sort of feels like, and it's like you catch something and it's going somewhere because God's got a purpose for that thought. His at the end is already there in his thing, and you're almost like picking it up and like sort of going with it. You're not going anywhere, but actually the thought has not just the beginning, but a middle and an ending for God, but all now. So for him, it's just a thought. But for us, you catch that thought and it takes you somewhere, even though you're not going anywhere in a sense, but actually that's what eternity is like. I mean, it's just different. So it's so hard to describe something, isn't it? We haven't got a grid of reference to be able to describe it. It's so hard when we live linearly. It's so hard to be able to express living in another way. Many years ago there was a really good sci-fi program, which actually the very first episode of it actually was a really good expression of linear and eternal time. It was actually Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and the first 2 pilot episodes were just when I actually first saw them. This is like, I don't know, probably 20 odd years ago, maybe. Something really struck me about how we can be stuck in the past even though we live linearly, because in the story the guy was still living in the death of his wife, even though he had moved on time-wise. He hadn't moved on because he was still stuck there in what happened and couldn't move beyond it. And so when he engaged the, whatever they were called, the prophets they were called, they sort of helped him to move on, because he engaged something in it which helped him move on. And it was a very interesting concept, but now I understand it so much more from the fact that I've been there myself and experienced it. And so I now really see, that I can see why I was so drawn to that in the first place, because it's something in my spirit resonated with it, and I put it on to an understanding of one thing, but actually it was so much more than that, it's a challenge to communicate, I find, which I find frustrating in one sense, because I like to communicate something that people understand rather than what they can't understand, which is not that helpful. But to say there's more for all of us, and the depths of that will call us deeper and deeper into it, I think is a hope statement of the fact that what I know now will be nothing compared to what I will know, and what I already do know in my spirit that my mind is not yet caught up to, which for me is the reality of it. I probably know, I can't put a figure on it, but it could be an immense amount more in my spirit than actually my mind actually cognitively is aware of. And when I do become cognitively aware, I often remember where I received that in a spiritual encounter, which is quite fun, because it was just like, oh yeah, that was that. That was that. And I have quite a few that was that moments, because I spend a lot of time in that place. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think it's a wonderful thing that you have matured so much, Mike, that you can say they were just bumps in the road, all those things that you went through. I like that.
They felt like mountains at the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like that. Just a reflection on that thought about stepping into God, that familiar scripture where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. That's really a snapshot of stepping right into the presence of the Lord with those that are stepping with you, isn't it? Would that be a good picture of that in the simple form that we're familiar with?
Yeah, I think that there's that sense where we sort of think that presence comes here, and therefore we only engage it when he comes where 2 or 3 are gathered here. But actually, there's an aspect of that which transcends our present experience and takes us into an eternal experience of that. because there's just levels of it. I mean, you know, and I think all the levels are all deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's great to experience and be in his presence here, but his presence in the realm of heaven is a deeper experience. His presence in eternity is an even deeper experience. So there's always something more. And you know, in a sense, where three are gathered, and you can see that's Father, Son, and Spirit gathered, we can be in the midst. And again, it's taking it from our present understanding of it, where most people, if you said that, okay, we're here right now, so God is going to come in a different way than he's here already, so we can feel him differently, which is true. And there is a truth and an element of truth to that. But that experience should just hopefully encourage us to draw nearer and not just step into something where we would call his anointing is there, or his presence is there, or the cloud is there, or something, whereas we're actually stepping into him and into, therefore, where he actually is. And there's levels of stepping into him and going back to where he actually is, rather than how he's representing himself in this realm or even the created realm of heaven. Heaven is still a created realm. It isn't eternity. Eternity all of it's in God, because everything must be in God, because God is infinite. So everything that he's created is still in him and part of him in one sense. You know, it's so hard to fathom or understand that. It's like, you know, thinking of everything being, you know, a page of paper which is never ending, and we're a dot on that paper, you know, and we can never see the end to it, but we're a dot on it, which, you know, is the enormity of God is sort of transcendence, but his immanence is he engages with us and comes and inhabits the praises of his people, and he also comes to live in us so that we can engage, you know, being, you know, in him being in us and us being in him, which is again completely paradoxical from one's mindset, isn't it? How can I be in something that's in me? You know, and how can that all work when we're all in something else? But this is the stuff of you know, engaging in the Spirit and experiencing it rather than trying to figure it out, because we haven't got the ability to figure it out. You know, I was talking to someone earlier about, you know, they were asking me about the Trinity. He says, well, you're asking me a question that I actually can't actually give you an answer because I'm not smart enough. You know, I have not got the ability to understand the Trinity in how it works. I can give you some platitudes and I can give you some theologically correct statements, and I can point you to probably 1,000 books written about it from a theological perspective, but I guarantee that virtually none of those people ever actually encountered the Trinity themselves in person in any way. They just wrote about it from a perspective that they got from the Bible. So it's very hard to actually express those things in a way which is in any way touching on what it really is. So I've just given up, basically. You know, I've given up trying to explain it because I can't. You know.
Just a thought before we close here, reflecting back on the statement about prayer meetings. Of course, that's where that was the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of the early days. Prayer meetings, we had them, you know, multiple times a week, and if we didn't go to prayer meeting, but boy, that whole thing for us has shifted now to where what you're describing is what we're going for, to be actually in a quote-unquote prayer meeting and do the work of the Spirit instead of just making noise. Not that it was wasted, don't get me wrong. It was all, that's where we were then. That's where, you know, that was our revelation and our experience. But certainly trying to shift from that now has been not a challenge to me, but it has been a walk. It has been a process.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And our journey has been very much like that. You know, it's like we had what we would call prayer meetings where we would come and pray, and we would, you know, talk to God, ask God stuff, and say, and then it sort of shifted into, well, we're really just coming and praying in tongues and just storming the heavens, and you know, all sorts of stuff's happening, but we don't really know what it is yet. But we just know a lot of things happen, and sometimes you get visions and prophetic stuff released and that sort of thing. To, well, actually, we're actually going into that realm and engaging God ourselves. We're talking to him face to face, all of us engaging and bringing a governmental perspective to it, or an intimacy perspective to it that we never had before. Yeah, so in a sense, what is prayer? Well, prayer really is just communicating with God. In its essence, we made it into actually asking God for things rather than talking to him, you know, and getting his perspective on something so that we could see things correctly, you know. I mean, I remember, you know, lots of prayer meetings, you know, when I go back to my brethren days, oh man, we had people who would pray for 20 minutes, you know, and they would quote every scripture that they had in their head in 20 minutes, and it would say nothing. You know, most of it just reminding God of who he was, you know, without really any content to it. Or you'd have other people who just come with a shopping list, and God, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? You know, well, that is just so far removed now to actually engaging in a place in the realms of God that you can know what he wants you to do, and you can actually do something about it, you know, which is, whenever I used to slip back into asking God to do something, you know, he would give me a quick reminder, you know, well, I'm not doing anything that I've given you authorization to do, so you do it, you know. And that's really the change. I'm only going to get God's perspective so I can do what he wants. That's what prayer is for me. I'm entering into a relationship of intimacy where I know what God wants me to do and what he authorizes me to do. Now I can go and do it. So, you know, people who say, well, the Bible says to, you know, to ask and seek and knock. We should still be praying in prayer meetings by asking, seeking, and knocking. Well, that's exactly what I do every day. I ask God, what is it you want me to do? I seeking for the revelation of how to do it, and I engage in that, you know, continually. So it's like, but it's taken on a whole new dimension of truth, you know, where we are actually together, not separated by heaven and earth, or, you know, different things. There is no dichotomy or separation of anything anymore. It's just my relationship with God in intimacy enables me to be responsible for the things that he's authorized me to do on a daily basis. And I long for the time when corporately we don't come to listen to someone speak or even to sing worship songs. We come corporately to go round the ark of the presence of God and get engagement of assignment of whatever he wants us to do, whether that's here in the room or translated sometime in time and space and doing something in some dimension, because we've just come and engaged God and found his purpose today, you know. Well, I long for that time. Not everyone's in the place that you could do it right now, so we're in transition, you know, sort of transitioning and away from an old engagement into, hey, heaven and earth are overlapped, we're just going to be in that place. And you know, I think that will be an amazing experience for people. But you obviously have to be able to help people to be able to have that experience. Otherwise, they will be there watching while some people are just having some wonderful time, and they're just sort of like, I don't get this, you know. So there's a process in it, but I long for that time when we're all at that place of maturity where that is just the normal way of engaging. You know, we don't try and sing a few praise songs to warm it all up. We just come and we may sing, we may do lots of things, but we are really stepping into that realm, or that realm and our realm are one, and We don't know whether we're in heaven or on earth. We're just in the presence of God. And being there, and just being there. And being there for some people will just be rest and peace and wonderful experience. And some people being there will be, I'm authorizing you to do this on my behalf. Because, you know, does anyone want to do this today? Because I get that, you know, in the Word of God, when, you know, God is there and he's saying, well, we're going to do some stuff with Ahab. Anyone interested? And it's like, I'll go. And I just love for that. You know, so we'd be in the presence of God, and it's just like, hey, I want to do this today. Who's up for it? You know, and it's like, yeah, me, I'll go for it. And okay, well, here's 5 legions of angels to go with you. You know, and it's just sort of that sort of interactive, being in the assemblies and courts of God and councils of God, and just being involved. It sounds fun. To me, might sound daunting to some people, I guess, but for me it would be like, wow, yeah, that would be awesome. Because I do that every time. I just, you know, I'm standing there. My mouth might be singing words, but my spirit is completely elsewhere most of the time.
Amen.
You know, and I'm engaged in some court somewhere, or I'm doing something. You know, my body's there, but you know, that's how it is. You know, it's grown to be over the last, you know, couple of years. But it's awesome.
I think I'm correct in remembering that the New Testament church had private believers-only gatherings. Maybe not all the time, but most of the time. Our public gatherings, our classical church, you know, is public, open to everyone. That's the history we have.
Yeah.
And I know what you're doing and what most of us have done in some level. We do have those private times where we can go in together, and the church has a sense of maturity instead of having half of it filled with, you know, people who don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in essence, if people were there who weren't engaging, you'd expect that some of the assignments that God was giving out that day would be to touch those people's lives with God's presence and the revelation of the truth. You know, so that if they needed healing would be released. You know, if they needed, you know, something happening in their lives, then the revelation of that would be released, and God would speak directly into their hearts and lives, that they would encounter God in it. You know, whereas we tend to think, oh, that would put a whole load of people off, so we'll tone it down. And actually, I think probably the opposite's true. If that's the reality, then people would engage that reality much more, because God would manifest himself in a way he's not doing right now, you know. But we'll see. We'll see what happens when we really start to engage here, and you know. But it's fun. It's a fun journey that we're on.
I had a plan when I was younger, probably really younger. I was going to get a 50-acre piece of land and put a fence around it, and then throw people in the middle of it and make them stay there until we matured them. But that didn't develop too far, so I gave up on that.
No, because we've got to use the trials of life and things as our stepping stones to maturity and overcoming, because we're supposed to subdue. You know, it's like, yeah, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, but subdue. So there's always something to subdue and overcome, and God uses those subduings and overcomings to bring about the change and transformation in our lives. But I think we can be proactive about it if we're all willing. If we're all willing to get in a field and go for it until all those things were sorted, I think we could. But generally, most people aren't willing, because they have to have the squeeze put onto them to be proactive enough to deal with anything. So God uses our life circumstances to highlight the fact that, hey, there's something there that he wants to deal with. You know, but I believe personally, in pursuing that in my own life, I've short-circuited a lot of those potential things where God would have had to put me into a situation or used a situation, because I've been saying, God, I want to be changed. I'm presenting myself for change, so change me. You know, show me what it is, because I don't need to fear you showing me what it is, because actually you love me. So however much change it needs, I'm up for it. You know, and I think that it does work if you're willing. Anyway, I better go.